I didn't expect to get married this way. Not in a small office in downtown Los Angeles. Not with a man I barely knew. And definitely not because the United States government was about to send me back to a country I hadn't seen in 10 years. My name is Amina Park. And what you're about to hear is how a Korean stranger married me to save me, and somehow ended up falling in love with me. And bestie, I fell even harder. But before I tell you about the wedding, before I tell you about him, I need to tell you how I ended up alone in America, crying in a coffee shop in Koreatown, with 14 days left before they put me on a plane back to Nigeria. If you believe love sometimes comes from the most unexpected places, please subscribe to Afro-Korean Love Stories, because this story, this love, it saved my life in ways I never imagined. My father was Nigerian, my mother was Korean, and I was their bridge, their beautiful mixture of two worlds that should have been my strength, but sometimes felt like my greatest confusion. I was born in Lagos, Nigeria, but when I was 8 years old, my mother got sick, cancer, and it moved fast, bestie, too fast. I remember sitting by her hospital bed, holding her hand, and she whispered to me in Korean, "Amina, promise me you'll follow your dreams. Promise me you'll cook. Promise me you'll make people happy with food the way I did." My mother was a chef, not just any chef. She ran a small Korean restaurant in Lagos that Nigerians loved. She taught me how to make kimchi, how to make bibimbap, how to fold mandu perfectly, and she taught me how to make jollof rice so good that even Koreans would ask for seconds. She died 3 weeks after that conversation. I was 9 years old. After she died, everything fell apart. My father, he tried, bestie, he really tried, but grief broke him. He started drinking, he stopped going to work, and one night, when I was 12, he didn't come home. The police found his car in the lagoon 2 days later. I became an orphan at 12 years old. My mother's sister, my Aunt Unji, she lived in Los Angeles. She worked as a nurse at Cedars-Sinai Hospital, and when she heard what happened, she flew to Lagos, packed my things, and brought me to America. She didn't have to. She had her own life, her own struggles, but she chose me. She chose to raise me. Have you ever had someone love you when they didn't have to? Someone who became your family by choice, not by obligation? Comment yes if you understand what that kind of love feels like. Aunt Unji gave me everything. She worked double shifts so I could go to good schools. She taught me English. She made sure I never forgot Korean or my Nigerian roots. She would make kimchi jjigae on Sundays and jollof rice on Saturdays. She made sure I was both, never half, always whole. When I graduated high school, I told her I wanted to go to culinary school. I wanted to honor my mother's memory. I wanted to create Afro-Korean fusion cuisine. I wanted to show the world that you could mix gochujang with suya spice. That you could put kimchi in Nigerian meat pie. That you could make something beautiful from two worlds. She cried when I told her, happy tears. She said, "Your mother would be so proud." I applied to the Culinary Institute of America in Los Angeles. It's one of the best culinary schools in the country. Bestie. And I got in. Not just got in. I got a full scholarship. A scholarship for students of multicultural backgrounds pursuing fusion cuisine. I was so happy, so grateful, so ready. I studied hard. I worked harder. I spent my mornings learning French techniques and my nights experimenting with Nigerian and Korean flavors. My instructors loved my work. They said I had a gift. They said I was going to change the culinary world. And then, in my final year, everything collapsed. I got an email. A cold, formal email from the scholarship committee. It said, "Due to an administrative error, your scholarship has been revoked. You have 14 days to pay the remaining tuition balance of $47,000, or your student visa will be terminated, and you will be required to leave the United States." $47,000, bestie. I didn't have $47 in my account. I had been living off my scholarship stipend, and the little money I made working part-time at a Korean barbecue restaurant in Koreatown. I called the school. I begged them. I explained it wasn't my fault, that I had done everything right. They said they were sorry. They said it was out of their hands. They said the error came from the federal scholarship program, and there was nothing they could do. I felt my world crumbling. Again. Just like when my mother died. Just like when my father died. Just like every time I thought I was finally safe, life reminded me I wasn't. And then, things got worse. 3 days after I got that email, I got a call from Cedars Sinai Hospital. My Aunt Yunji had collapsed at work. Stroke. A massive stroke. They rushed her into surgery, and when I got to the hospital, the doctor told me, she's stable, but she needs long-term care. We need a legal guardian to sign off on treatment decisions. I said, I'm her niece, I'm her family. And the doctor looked at me with sad eyes and said, I'm sorry, but you're not a legal guardian. And because of your visa situation, we can't assign that to you. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My aunt, the woman who saved me, who raised me, who loved me, was lying in a hospital bed. And I couldn't even sign the papers to help her, because I wasn't American, because my visa was expiring, because I was nobody. If you've ever felt powerless when someone you love needed you most, drop a heart in the comments. Because I need you to know, that feeling, it almost destroyed me. I left the hospital that day, and I just walked. I didn't know where I was going. I ended up in Koreatown, on Western Avenue. I sat outside a small coffee shop called Morning Calm Cafe, and I cried. I cried so hard I couldn't stop. People walked past me. Some stared, some looked away. No one stopped. Except him. I didn't see him coming. I just heard a soft voice say, "Excuse me, are you okay?" I looked up, and there he was. Tall, gentle eyes, dark hair falling slightly over his forehead. He was holding 2 cups of coffee. I tried to wipe my tears quickly. I tried to pretend I was fine, but my voice cracked when I said, "I'm okay. Thank you." He sat down next to me. Not too close, not invasive, just close enough. He handed me one of the cups. He said, "You don't look okay. And that's okay. Sometimes warm things melt what cold days have frozen." Bestie, I don't know why, but that line, those words, they broke something open in me. I started crying again. And this stranger, this man I didn't know, he just sat there. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't tell me to stop crying. He just stayed. When I finally stopped, I told him everything. I don't know why I did. Maybe because he felt safe. Maybe because I had no one else. Maybe because sometimes strangers hold our pain better than people who know us. I told him about my aunt, about my visa, about my scholarship, about feeling like I was drowning and no one could see me going under. He listened. Really listened. And when I finished, he said, "I'm Kairo Han. And I don't know how yet. But I'm going to help you figure this out." I laughed, a bitter, broken laugh. I said, "You don't even know me. Why would you help me?" And he looked at me with the most serious expression and said, "Because I know what it's like to feel invisible. And you shouldn't have to feel that way." Have you ever met someone who saw you when you felt invisible? Comment yes if you've experienced that rare, sacred moment. We talked for 2 hours. He told me he was a chef, that he owned a small Korean fusion restaurant in Culver City called Haenyul, which means sky. He told me he had moved to LA from Seoul 5 years ago, that he had his own struggles, his own pain, but he didn't go into details. When it got dark, he walked me to the bus stop. He made sure I got on safely. And before the bus pulled away, he knocked on the window and mouthed, "It's going to be okay." I wanted to believe him, but I didn't see how. 2 days later, I went back to the hospital to visit my aunt. She was awake but weak. She couldn't speak much because of the stroke. But when she saw me, she squeezed my hand, and I knew she was trying to tell me, "Don't give up." I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, staring at the deportation notice on my phone, when someone sat across from me. It was Kairo. I looked up, shocked. I said, "How did you find me?" And he smiled softly and said, "You told me your aunt was at Cedars." I took a chance. He had brought me food, homemade kimbap and a small container of miokguk, seaweed soup. He said, "You need to eat. You can't fight if you don't have strength." I started crying again, because no one had taken care of me like that in so long. We talked again, and this time, I told him everything. The deportation date, the legal guardian issue. How I felt trapped. How I felt like I was failing my aunt. Failing myself. Failing my mother's memory. Kairo got very quiet. He stared at his hands for a long time. And then he asked, "How much time do you have?" I said, 11 days. He nodded slowly. And then he said something I didn't understand at first. He said, "There might be a way." I looked at him, confused. I said, "What do you mean?" And he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Marry me, bestie." I thought I heard him wrong. I thought maybe I was so tired, so stressed, that my brain was making things up. I said, "What?" And he said it again, calmly, gently, "Marry me." I laughed, a nervous, disbelieving laugh. I said, "Kairo, we barely know each other. You can't marry me." And he leaned forward and said, "If you marry me, you can stay. You get a green card. You become a legal guardian for your aunt. You finish school. You don't lose everything you've worked for." I stared at him. I said, "But why? Why would you do this for me?" And he said, "Because I don't like watching good people suffer. Please subscribe if you believe some people are sent into your life exactly when you need them most." Because Kairo, he was my miracle. I told him I needed time to think. He said, "You have 11 days. I'll wait." I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking, is this crazy? Is this legal? Is this even real? But then I thought about my aunt, about my dreams, about my mother's voice telling me to never give up. The next day, I called him. I said, "If we do this, it's just paperwork, right? You're just helping me." And he said, "Yes, just paperwork. No pressure. No expectations." I said yes. 3 days later, we went to the courthouse in downtown Los Angeles. I wore a simple white dress I bought from a thrift store on Melrose. He wore a dark blue suit. We didn't have rings. We didn't have flowers. We didn't even have witnesses except the court clerk. The officiant asked, "Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" And I said, "I do." He asked Kairo, "Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" And Kairo looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "I do." And just like that, I became Amina Park Han, a married woman, to a man I had known for less than 2 weeks. When we walked out of the courthouse, it started raining. Kairo took off his suit jacket and held it over both of us. We ran to his car, laughing. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than fear. I felt hope. That night, he took me to his apartment in Silver Lake. It was small but beautiful, warm, filled with plants and books and cooking utensils everywhere. He said, "You can stay here. I have a guest room. Take your time. No rush." I was so grateful, so overwhelmed. I didn't know how to thank him. He made dinner, kimchi fried rice and spam. Simple, comforting. We ate in comfortable silence. And then he said, "Tomorrow, we'll go to immigration and start the green card process. And then we'll go to the hospital and get you set up as your aunt's legal guardian." I started crying, again, and he reached across the table and held my hand. He said, "You're not alone anymore, Amina. I've got you. Bestie." That was the moment I realized. This man, this stranger, he was the kindest person I had ever met. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't see yet, was that he wasn't doing this just to be kind. He was doing this because somewhere between that coffee shop and the courthouse, he had started falling for me. And I was about to fall for him too. Besties, what happened next? How we went from strangers to something so much deeper. You need to hear it. Don't go anywhere. Subscribe so you don't miss chapter 2. Because this love story, it's just beginning. Living with Kairo was nothing like I expected. I thought it would be awkward. I thought we would tiptoe around each other like strangers forced to share space. But it wasn't like that at all. It was easy, natural, like we had known each other for years. Every morning he would wake up before me and make coffee. Not just any coffee. He learned how I liked it. 2 sugars, a little bit of cream, and he would leave it on the counter with a small note. Simple notes, things like, "Have a good day," or "You've got this," or sometimes just a smiley face. And every morning, those notes made me smile. I started helping him at his restaurant, Hanuel. It was small. Only 12 tables. But bestie. The food was incredible. He made modern Korean dishes with a twist. Galbi tacos. Kimchi. Carbonara. Bulgogi sliders. And people loved it. I told him about my dream of Afro-Korean fusion, and instead of laughing or dismissing it, he said, "Show me." So one night, after the restaurant closed, I cooked for him. I made jollof rice with gochugaru. I made suya spiced Korean fried chicken. I made pepper soup with kimchi, and I watched his face as he tasted everything. He closed his eyes, he took his time, and then he looked at me and said, "Amina, this is genius. This is what the world needs. Bestie." No one had ever believed in my food like that. No one had ever made me feel like my dream was possible. That night, we stayed up until 3 in the morning talking about food, about flavors, about how cuisine is storytelling, how every dish carries memory, how cooking is love made visible. And somewhere in that conversation, I felt it. A shift, a warmth, a pull toward him that I couldn't explain. If you've ever felt yourself falling for someone without meaning to, comment yes, because I was falling. And I didn't know how to stop it. The green card process was complicated. We had to prove our marriage was real. We had to do interviews, show photos, show that we lived together. And at first, it felt like an act, like we were playing a role. But then, the acting started feeling real. One night, we were practicing for the immigration interview. The lawyer had given us a list of questions they might ask. Things like, what side of the bed does your spouse sleep on? What's their morning routine? What do they eat for breakfast? Kairo answered every question about me correctly. He knew I slept on the left side. He knew I hummed when I cooked. He knew I liked my eggs scrambled, not fried. I stared at him. I said, "How do you know all of this?" And he looked at me with soft eyes and said, "I pay attention." My heart did something strange in that moment. It flipped. It raced. It whispered, "Oh no. You're in trouble." My aunt was getting better, slowly. The doctors said she would need months of physical therapy, but she was going to recover. And when I told her about Kairo, about the marriage, she looked at me for a long time. Then she said in broken English, "He good man. You be careful, you fall in love." I laughed it off. I said, "Auntie, it's not like that. It's just paperwork." She smiled, the kind of smile that said, "You're lying to yourself, but I'll let you figure it out." And bestie, she was right. 2 months into the marriage, Kairo's ex-girlfriend showed up at the restaurant. Her name was Hayrin. She was beautiful, polished, designer, everything. And the moment she saw me, I knew she hated me. She walked straight up to Kairo and said in Korean, "Who is this?" Kairo's face went hard. He said, "Hayrin, you need to leave." But she didn't leave. She looked at me with cold eyes and said in English, "So you're the charity case he married." How sweet. I felt my face burn. I wanted to say something, defend myself, but I couldn't find the words. Kairo stepped between us. He said, "Don't talk to her like that." Hayrin laughed. A cruel laugh. She said, "Kairo, we both know this isn't real. You married her because you felt sorry for her. It's what you do. You save broken things. But you don't love them." And she walked out. I stood there, frozen. And even though Kairo tried to reassure me, her words stayed in my head. "You don't love them. You don't love them. You don't love them." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking, what if she's right? What if this is just pity? What if I'm just another broken thing he's trying to fix? The next morning, Kairo noticed I was distant. He asked me what was wrong, and I lied. I said, "Nothing, I'm just tired." But he knew. He always knew. Over the next few weeks, Hayrin started showing up everywhere. At the restaurant, at the farmer's market where Kairo bought ingredients. She would smile at him, touch his arm, whisper things I couldn't hear. And every time, I felt smaller, more invisible, more like I didn't belong in his life. One day, Kairo had to go to San Francisco for a food festival. He asked me to come with him. But I said no. I said I needed to stay and help at the restaurant. The truth was, I needed space. I needed to think. I needed to figure out if I was falling in love with a man who only saw me as a responsibility. While he was gone, Hayrin came to the restaurant. She sat at the bar and ordered a glass of wine. And then she said, "Can we talk?" I didn't want to, but I also didn't want to run. She said, "I'm not here to fight, I just want you to know the truth. Kairo has a hero complex. He sees someone struggling, and he has to fix it. That's what he did with me. That's what he's doing with you. But it's not love. It's obligation." I felt my throat tighten. I said, "Why are you telling me this?" She said, "Because I don't want you to get hurt. He's going to get tired of playing house. And when he does, he'll leave, just like he left me." And she walked out. I sat there for a long time. And I felt something break inside me. Because what if she was right? What if I was just a project? What if this whole thing was just him being kind, and I mistook kindness for love? When Kairo came back from San Francisco, I had made a decision. I was going to leave, not permanently, just create distance. Protect my heart before it got destroyed. I waited until he fell asleep, and then I packed a small bag. I left a note on the kitchen counter. It said, "Thank you for everything. I'll always be grateful, but I think it's time I stood on my own." I stayed at a cheap motel near LAX. I turned off my phone. I just needed to breathe. But what I didn't know was that Kairo woke up 2 hours later. He saw the note, and he panicked. He called me 50 times. He texted me 100 times. And when I didn't answer, he got in his car and drove all over Los Angeles looking for me. He went to the hospital, to the school, to Koreatown, everywhere he thought I might be. And then, he remembered. I had once told him, "When I feel lost, I go to the beach. I sit by the water, and I talk to my mother." He drove to Santa Monica Pier. It was 2 in the morning. The pier was empty except for a few homeless people and late-night fishermen. And there I was, sitting on a bench, staring at the ocean, crying. He walked up slowly. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat next to me. And then, in the softest voice, he said, "Why did you leave?" I couldn't look at him. I said, "Because I don't want to be your charity case. I don't want to be the broken thing you're fixing." He was quiet for a long time, and then he said, "Is that what you think this is?" I said, "Hayrin told me. She told me you have a hero complex, that you don't love me. You just feel sorry for me." Kairo laughed, a bitter, frustrated laugh. He said, "Hayrin doesn't know anything." I finally looked at him, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Anger, hurt, desperation. He said, "Amina, I didn't marry you because I felt sorry for you." I said, "Then why?" And he took a deep breath. He looked out at the ocean, and then he looked back at me. And he said, "I married you because the thought of you leaving, the thought of never seeing you again, it terrified me. I married you because from the moment I saw you crying outside that coffee shop, something in me shifted. I married you because I couldn't imagine my life without you in it. Bestie, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I just stared at him." He continued. He said, "I know this started as paperwork. I know we were supposed to be helping each other. But somewhere along the way, it became real for me. You became real for me, and I don't know when it happened. Maybe it was when you made me laugh for the first time in years. Maybe it was when you cooked for me and I saw your passion. Maybe it was when you sang in the kitchen and didn't know I was listening. I don't know when, but I know it happened. And I know I love you. If you've ever heard the words you've been waiting for your whole life, drop a heart. Because bestie," my heart exploded. Tears were streaming down my face. I said, "You love me?" He said, "I love you. I love the way you hum when you cook. I love the way you talk to your aunt in Korean, even though she can barely respond. I love the way you mix cultures like it's the most natural thing in the world. I love how strong you are even when you feel weak. I love you, Amina. Not because you're broken, but because you're you." And then he did something that made my soul leave my body. He got on his knees, right there on the pier, and he pulled out a small box. He said, "I bought this 2 weeks ago. I was waiting for the right moment, but I don't want to wait anymore." He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring, a thin gold band with a small diamond. He said, "Amina Park, will you marry me? For real this time. Not for paperwork, not for visas, but because I want to spend the rest of my life making you smile." Because I want to build a restaurant with you. Because I want to wake up every day and make you coffee with 2 sugars and a little bit of cream. Will you marry me? I was sobbing, ugly crying, the kind of crying where you can't catch your breath. I said, yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring on my finger. And then he stood up. And he kissed me. Bestie, it was the kind of kiss that makes you believe in magic. The kind that makes you forget where you are. The kind that makes you feel like you're the only 2 people in the world. We stood there, on that pier, holding each other. And I felt it. I felt safe. I felt loved. I felt home. Subscribe if you believe the best love stories are the ones that start with 2 broken people healing each other. The next morning, we went to the hospital together. My aunt was sitting up, doing physical therapy. When she saw us holding hands, she smiled. A big, knowing smile. Kairo told her, in Korean, I love your niece, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life taking care of her. My aunt looked at me, and she said in broken English, I told you, you fall in love. And we all laughed. Over the next few months, everything changed. Kairo and I started working on our fusion restaurant concept. We called it Bridges. Because that's what we were. Bridges between cultures, between worlds, between broken pasts and hopeful futures. We tested recipes. We fought about flavors. We laughed until we cried. We cooked until 3 in the morning, and we fell more in love every single day. Hyrin tried to cause problems one more time. She showed up at the restaurant with a reporter, trying to expose our marriage as fake. But when the reporter interviewed us, when they saw how we looked at each other, how we talked about food, how we moved in sync in the kitchen, they said, this is real. Anyone can see this is real. Hyrin finally gave up. And we never saw her again. My aunt recovered fully. She came to live with us for a while. And watching her and Kairo bond over Korean dramas and cooking was one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced. A year after our Pier proposal, we had a real wedding. A beautiful wedding. We had it at the restaurant. My Nigerian family flew in from Lagos. Kairo's family flew in from Seoul. We mixed traditions. I wore a white dress and changed into traditional Korean hanbok and Nigerian iro and buba. We served jollof rice and kimchi, pounded yam and tteokbokki, suya and galbi, and everyone said it was the best food they had ever tasted. When Kairo and I stood at the altar, he whispered, thank you for crying in front of that coffee shop. I whispered back, thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. And we kissed, as husband and wife, for real this time. Besties, our restaurant, Bridges, opened 6 months later in Culver City, and it became one of the most talked about restaurants in Los Angeles. Food critics called it revolutionary. They called it a love letter to fusion cuisine. But for us, it was just our story, on a plate. Every dish told a story. Every flavor was a memory. Every bite was a bridge. And every single day, I wake up next to the man who saved me. The man I saved too. Because that's the truth, bestie. He didn't just save me. I saved him too. From loneliness, from emptiness, from a life without color. People ask me all the time, do you regret marrying a stranger? And I say, he's not a stranger. He never was. He was just the love of my life, waiting for the right moment to find me. If you've ever felt lost, and then found exactly where you belong, share this video. If you believe love comes when you least expect it, subscribe. If you believe 2 broken people can make each other whole, leave a comment telling me your story. Because bestie, life is hard, love is complicated, but sometimes, on your hardest day, someone sits next to you and says, sometimes warm things melt what cold days have frozen, and that someone changes everything. My name is Amina Park Han, and this is my love story. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that love like this exists, because it does, and you deserve it too. Subscribe to Afro-Korean Love Stories for more real-life love stories that will make you believe again. Until next time, besties, keep believing, keep hoping, keep loving. This is my story, and I'm so grateful I get to share it with you. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. Comment your country and tell me if this story touched your heart. I read every single comment. Thank you for being part of this community. I love you all, besties. See you in the next story.